ISIS is in the news. You think of it as being Middle Eastern, but you know, ISIS is in America. In fact, we're going to talk about it with today's guest, Avi Lipkin. Avi, always nice to have you here. And we were talking before we went on today, and I think we really need to emphasize this. We read about ISIS in the news, the beheadings, the absolutely fanatic behavior. And we think, well, that doesn't really involve me. It's across the ocean, you know, and I guess I'll just go to the grocery store and live life as usual. But what you're telling me is that we're target number one for those people.
What I've been saying for the last 26 years is that there are two types of Islam. There is what we call the revolutionary Islam, which is 9/11, and then there is the evolutionary Islam, which is the Saudi and Qatari and other Islamic countries' plan to use their oil finances to buy America out over a period of many decades, which we see happening. The Islamization of America is a peaceful Islamization of America. What I wanted to focus on now was ISIS, which is not peaceful. And ISIS even views the Saudi leadership as heretic and collaborators with the Christian West, deserving death. The Saudi leadership should not be doing business with the Christian West. Now, 9/11 was something that my wife, not that she predicted, she listens to the Arabs, and they were saying that after 1993, the first attack on the World Trade Center.
By the way, let me just interject that Avi's wife grew up in Egypt and speaks Arab fluently and is charged by the Israeli government with listening to Arabic communications, radio, television, I suppose, and sort of reporting on what they're talking about, right?
Right, and for many years before, and in my first book, Is Fanatic Islam a Global Threat, which came out in 1997, 4 years before 9/11, I was focusing on the plans of Islam for a second attack on the World Trade Center, which was with aircraft. And many PC, politically correct people in America were saying, oh, you shouldn't say these things. The Arabs are good people. The Muslims are good people. Yes, the Arabs are good people. Muslims are good people. But some of them want to destroy the World Trade Center. And if at first you don't succeed, try again. So what my wife has been doing and what I've been doing is to monitor the broadcast, to monitor their activities. And there are revolutionaries who do not like what the evolutionary leaders are doing to try to be chummy with the American leadership and to try to take over the United States through the buyout. And the approach of the revolutionaries is what was created crooked, in other words, Christianity, in their opinion, was created crooked, must be destroyed. It cannot be straightened out. And so what I'm watching is the ISIS plans and other plans of other Islamic groups to infiltrate the United States through the Canadian borders, through the Mexican borders, through jet charter flights. Because illegal Muslims are being flown into this country every day by jet charter flights paid for by the U.S. taxpayer.
And it's as easy as can be to charter a jet somewhere and fly in here and just slip into the population at large.
And many of these so-called refugees are actually ISIS operatives. In fact, they say, for example, that we're going to destroy the Vatican. We're going to destroy Rome. And what you have today is thousands and thousands of Syrians, ISIS, thousands of Somalis, thousands of Libyans taking boats across the Mediterranean, getting picked up by the Italian Navy, given asylum, and they're all getting, they say they're going to do it, that they're going to take the Vatican and blow it up and destroy it, because the Vatican, for the Islamic world, is the religious enemy. America is the political enemy.
In their literature, I see ISIS condemning what they call Rome. Capital R, capital O, capital M, capital E is a huge, if you will, target for them. They talk about Rome like I would talk about a mission that I might want to carry out, and I'm going to get there and I'm going to do that thing. ISIS speaks the same way about Rome. We're going to get there, we're going to destroy Rome, Why Rome?
Well, because out of the 2 billion Christians on the face of the earth, 1.2 billion are estimated to be Catholics. In other words, they're the biggest Christian denomination. America is the biggest Christian country. Those are the targets and the crosshairs of the Islamic revolutionary agenda.
Let's talk about America now. America, I think by any measure, is fast asleep. I heard one man say a while back that the Americans are sound asleep and dreaming that they're wide awake. And that's kind of our situation here. Business as usual, and yet we are being infiltrated. I think Islamic Rivalry, your new book, points this out in pretty good detail. And by the way, we're going to be talking more about this book. This is Avi's 7th book.
Right.
And by the way, the most personal, the most dynamic, the most, well, there's more Avi in this book than I've ever seen before. He really puts himself on paper, and it's a good read. It's called Islamic Rivalry. The subhead is ISIS and Iran are fighting for the heart of Islamic identity. They're serious. They're here.
You know what? I'll tell you something. ISIS is Sunni. Iran is Shiite. And this is a fight to the death. This is 1,400 years of internecine war, which will never end until either one side or both sides are dead. They're killing each other. It's not like the Protestants and the Catholics who had a war of 300 years, and praise God, the war is over. Catholics and Protestants are brothers today. The problem here with the Iranians and the ISIS is they have their sleeper cells on American soil.
Now, you started writing about this years ago, before we even heard about ISIS.
Right.
About the fact that there were sleeper cells in
Yes.
the
So the Iranian and Shiite sleeper cells say, if America supports ISIS, we're going to carry out terrorist attacks on American soil. ISIS says, if America supports Iran and the Shiites, we will carry out terrorist attacks on American soil. So it's kind of like America is in a double checkmate by the 2 different Islamic streams, Shiite and Sunni. These Islamic streams do not like the idea of a strong Christian America, and it's one of the reasons why Christianity is being suppressed, and Americans are told to go back to sleep, just keep working, ignore the threat like an ostrich sticking its head in the sand, and the threat will go away.
Now let's talk about what has led up to the present moment. Let's go back really to the beginning of the 20th century, move up through World Wars I, World War II, up to the 67 Six-Day War. All of these things, the foundation of the PLO in the early 1980s and on up to today. What in the world? How can we, as Americans, understand what's going on, and what should we be doing about it?
Well, if you look at the recent history of the last 100 years of the Islamic world, you take, for example, the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And the great Turkish leader, Kemal Atatürk, wanted to secularize Turkey, westernize Turkey, modernize Turkey. He put chains on the doors of the mosques. He suppressed Islam, adopted a Latin script. And for decades, Turkey was a member of NATO and considered pretty much a Western country. It was Muslim, but they kind of suppressed Islam. Iran, same thing. The Shah of Iran chained the doors of the mosques shut, exiled the Ayatollahs to France, and westernized and modernized Iran, so much so that Iran was an ally of Israel, Iran was an ally of the United States, and was a cornerstone in the war against Soviet Russia. So you had these anti-Islamic leaders. They're Muslims, but they were anti-Islamic. Countries like Egypt and Libya and Algeria and Tunisia and Yemen and Iraq and Iran and Iraq, these countries under Saddam Hussein were anti-Islamic. And the fanatic Muslims were suppressed severely. The Muslim Brotherhood was outlawed in Egypt, except for 1 or 2 years, since 1929. So the leaderships were dictatorial. They were Muslim by faith, but they were not Islamic regimes.
So what happened? The Muslim Brotherhood is rising in power. ISIS is rising in power. What in the world happened?
It's called the soup kitchen. The Saudis invested tremendous amounts of money in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, in Turkey, and give this a few generations, you have new generations of young people, and these families are having many children, and the percentages, the proportion of the population which becomes fanatically Muslim because they have been fed in the soup kitchens of the mosques. The people who are hungry, bring your hungry, bring your poor, we shall feed them. This was paid for by Saudis, meaning it was paid for by American cash for Saudi oil.
Let me do a quick change of subject right quick. And I want to go back to 1947-48, the foundation of the State of Israel. When I think of Israel, I think of a biblical miracle.
Right.
A miracle of God. And the fulfillment of certain biblical prophecy that said that the Jews would return to the land and that they would, the desert would blossom as a rose. And you've heard all this 1,000 times. And we in the West root for Israel. We cheer for Israel, I want to tell you, and we still are. And we're a little bit afraid now. Is Israel going to catch it? Is Israel going to actually be able to remain tenable? What's going to happen there?
Well, I believe that ISIS will take Jordan. We will see the black flags of ISIS along the Jordan River, which will prompt Israel to defend itself. Israel has no choice but to defend itself. In American history, there's a term manifest destiny.
Yes.
And Israel will be seeing manifest destiny. And with your permission, I wanted to talk about David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. I was 15 years old in America, and I had a Hebrew teacher, and he helped me to write to David Ben-Gurion. I was 15, this is in 1964.
Wow.
And this is the first letter. And he says here, that, and I have the translation on the back in English, and Ben-Gurion says, the Jews will not survive in the diaspora because of intermarriage. And we see that happening. Today, out of every 100 Jews in America, 80 marry Christians. And I'm not saying it's bad to marry Christians. We have the same God, the same Bible, Messiah is a Jew. And I think there's a bottom line also, because when ISIS comes to America to slaughter the Jews, which is imminent, the Jews are going to have to flee to Israel with their Christian spouses and children. That's why I'm forming a Judeo-Christian political party, which is covered in my book, The Bible Block, from 10 years ago, but now it's coming to fruition. The party will be registered very imminently. So Ben-Gurion says, if you don't move to Israel, you're not a Jew, your children will not be Jewish, and definitely your grandchildren will not be Jewish because they will be Christian. In this letter, he says, Israel will not survive unless it doubles and triples its population. That was when Israel was 3 million. Today, Israel is 6 million Jews and 500,000 Christians. I predict when ISIS goes into action at the call of jihad in America, Canada, and the diasporas, we will see a tsunami of 10 million Jews and Christians moving to the land of Israel. Now, when ISIS attacks Israel from Jordan and from Syria, and Israel has to defend itself, Israel's borders will not shrink back to the borders of 1967. Israel's borders will expand eastward. And in fact, today, because of the imminent slaughter of the Druze in the south of Syria, there are calls by many people, including Druze in Israel, to go and defend their brethren and extend the umbrella of protection of the Israeli military to the Druze, Jebel Druze, which is south of Syria, and to the Kurds in the north. And I believe eventually what will happen is our borders will expand to the Deuteronomy 11 borders, and the population of Jews and Christians will increase in the land of Israel, because when a Jew flees to Israel, he or she will have to take the Christian spouse and children with them.
Now, my reaction to that, as I was listening to Avi, was, well, wait a minute. We're seeing exactly the opposite thing happen in Israel. There was just a decision in the last few days that no longer can your passport say that you were born in Israel. It has to say you were born in Jerusalem, because there is no such place as Israel. It's not a legitimate state. And the Palestinians seem to be gaining in power and control, and there seems to be more and more of a movement in Israel to move Israel back to the pre-1967 borders. And we keep hearing in the news that Israel is going to shrink and shrink and shrink. And eventually be dwindled down to practically nothing. And you're saying precisely the opposite thing.
God will reshuffle the deck. You know, Hillary Clinton, I shouldn't be mentioning names, but she was Secretary of State, and all the Secretaries of State before her were constantly attacking Israel. This is a tradition going back to '67. The U.S. Congress is 80% pro-Israel. The military is pro-Israel. The American people are pro-Israel.
Yes.
But the State Department and the White House over the last 40, 50 years has been anti-Israel. And all of a sudden, in February of 2011, a Tunisian fruit vendor self-immolates, starting the Arab Spring, and the whole Middle East collapses. And everyone was searching in the State Department on how to blame Israel. And Israel had nothing to do with it. It was God who reshuffled the deck. And then just a year ago, all of a sudden, ISIS appears. Again, everyone's trying to crush Israel, shrink Israel down. ISIS appears, and ISIS is part of God's plan for Israel's eventual expansion to borders that God promised in the Bible.
Now, I like that. I like hearing that because you haven't given up.
No.
You don't have a dark view of the future.
Not at all. And not only that, Israel will be the safest place on earth, safer than the United States. When all these terrorist attacks begin, it will be safer in Israel. And so for all of the people, and you just came to Israel with our Lipkin tours, you saw how safe it was, how nice it was. And I recommend to all your viewers, please come to Israel, see with your own eyes. We prove the veracity of the Bible. And if you prove the veracity of the Bible by going to these places, Bethel and Shiloh and other places, you prove God's existence. And if God exists, then why should we be concerned?
As an aside, on that recent trip to Israel, one of the things that really impressed me was the number of people from around the world that you see all at the same time. You can stand in the old city in one spot and hear 15 different languages being spoken.
Correct.
There are people from everywhere, and I stopped and watched this, and I said, why are all these people coming here to this place?
Because Israel is the apple of God's eye.
I think they know there's something there, and they're trying to find out what it is. I think that's what's going on.
I think the people in the group that came with you found what they were looking for.
Yeah, it was a good trip,
Yeah.
and we appreciated it. So you have a positive view, and this is wonderful for me because I read the news, and the more I read the news, the more negative my view. We're seeing a degeneration of society in America. We're seeing the administration progressively moving away from the longstanding ties we've had with Israel. We're seeing our military, our State Department moving more and more in an Arabist direction. And yet you're standing right there and saying, no, this is all going to go forward in a positive way. I like to hear that.
Well, I think that history is like a pendulum. Pendulum swings to the right, swings to the left. Yeah. And the pendulum has swung as far as it could go to the left. And I see the move of God in America. I see the people. I go to the churches. I've been in 1,000 churches. And I can feel that the pendulum is swinging back to the right, swinging back to God's purposes. And that includes loving Israel, supporting Israel, loving America, and standing for what America always really meant and stood for. Alexis de Tocqueville said, America will be the greatest country on earth because the American people are good people and their pulpits are on fire for the Lord. Conversely, when America's pulpits are no longer on fire for the Lord, America loses its preeminence. And that's what we have to prevent. We cannot allow America to lose its preeminence.
Now, back to the dark side for a moment, because I really want to flesh out what you're talking about in Islamic rivalry, and that we have porous borders in America. The southern border, thousands of people are coming across unchecked. A lot of them are people from the Middle East. A lot of them would be terrorists. You've written about that in your previous books. This is I think, a developing threat, and yet you're still taking a bright view of this whole thing. What's going to happen? How would you lay out the next, say, 18 calendar months?
Let me say a negative thing. The negative thing is I believe there will be tremendous jihadist attacks on American soil. It's imminent. There will be tremendous upheavals in Europe. I think the outcome of this will be like a slap in the face, waking people up, waking up governments. There was a mayor in France, for example, who said Islam should be banned in France. You have a country in Africa called Angola. Angola just came out with a law banning Islam in Angola. Japan bans Islam. There is no Islam in Japan. There are some Muslims who come with special permission, but we will be seeing increasingly Islam being banned because it doesn't make sense to allow a system in your country that is calling for the death of everybody. So people are asleep because the agenda believes if people are asleep and keep working as normal, then the economy goes on. And the only thing that matters is the economy because these people don't have God. But I think God has a plan, he has a purpose, and I think that in the end the pendulum swings back in the right direction. And I believe America will be restored as a Christian country.
Avi's book, Islamic Rivalry, ISIS and Iran, Fighting for the Heart of Islamic Identity. I suppose that's a bright side from my perspective, because if the enemy is fighting against itself, that's always good for me.
I would recommend to the viewers to read 2 Chronicles chapter 20. Read the whole chapter. And it's an unbelievable story of three armies that besieged Jerusalem. And the Israelites inside of the city knew that they had no defense against these three armies. They were the armies of Ammon, which is today Amman, Moab, and Seir. Seir is Arabia. And these three armies came to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews. And King Jehoshaphat said to the people, go to the temple in Jerusalem, go to the heart of Jerusalem, prostrate, pray to God before the high priest, and God will give us his answer of salvation. The next morning, they opened the gates of the city, and the three armies killed each other and died of the plague.
Wow.
Which is what we see happening today. The Bible repeats itself again and again. And today, I hurt for human beings dying, but the Shiite system is horrible and the Sunni system is horrible, and they're all fighting each other.
And as I read the Bible, I read time and time and time again of stories about a besieged Israel becoming victorious, absolutely victorious, when there is no possibility for victory. In other words, miraculous victories, one way or another.
Well, if there were a possibility for victory, then we would claim the credit. But when there is no possibility for victory, God gets the credit.
Does I wasn't even going to ask this question, but it suddenly occurred to me, does the Israeli mentality have some kind of almost a supernatural positive attitude about the future in spite of all of these things?
I believe that Israel is the 8th happiest country in the world. In other words, they checked 150 countries to see are the people happy. Israel's the 8th happiest country.
I wonder where we would fall on that scale.
I think America was 31 or something out of 150. I think Finland was number 1 and Denmark and...
I talked to Jews in Israel while we were there, and they all have this vision, this purposeful idea that every Jew should have his family, he should have his domicile, and he should have his own vineyard. In other words, settle in, live normally, live productively, live happily. That's sort of the Israeli dream, to have you...
And go to the mall.
Go to the mall.
We have nice malls in Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is no sense of defeat there at all. There's no sense of impending doom. And that's biblical as far as I'm concerned. Now, I don't know what the Jews would say. They would say, well, this is just the way we live. But from my perspective as a Christian across the ocean, God time and time again promises victory to the Israeli army in the latter days. I think of Zechariah 12, where the Israeli army just becomes supernaturally efficient, and the enemy just rolls away in flames. And you see this imagery time and time and time again.
It was in the Bible, 2 Chronicles chapter 20.
Yeah. Miraculous victory. Islamic Rivalry is the name of the book, Avi Lipkin's latest, and by the way, his most personal and passionate book. I think he lays it all out here. We have offered his first 6 books for years here, and this is the one called Return to Mecca, which is not quite my favorite. Islam Prophesied in Genesis is maybe my favorite book of yours, but these last 2 books talk about things that nobody else is talking about. You are cutting edge in your thinking, I believe. Then the first 4 books is Fanatic Islam, a Global Threat, Israel's Bible Block, this one Islamic Threat Updates, and this one Christian Revival for Israel's Survival. I love the thought in that one. These 6 books we're still offering as the Avi Lipkin package right now for $79.95. Check prophecywatchers.com, the online bookstore, and you'll find the Avi Lipkin package, these 6 books for $79.95 with a bonus. Avi's brand new book, the 7th book, included in that package, absolutely free. Just order the Avi Lipkin package. And by the way, if you want to have Islamic Rivalry by itself alone, we're offering it at the online bookstore for $19.95. Check prophecywatchers.com, the online bookstore, and you'll go right to these offerings. Islamic Rivalry. We're down to a couple of minutes, Avi. What do you want to leave people with today? From the book, from your heart, what would you have us to know about you, your plans, Israel? What's going to happen? What should we be looking for?
Well, like I said before, I predict terrorist attacks. Everything is just fine, and then one morning we wake up and things are happening. I believe that Jewish people and their Christian spouses are going to have to be picking up and moving to Israel. I'm forming a Judeo-Christian political party to represent these, I estimate, 5 to 10 million immigrants. Israel will, as Ben-Gurion said in his letters, maybe we should offer the letters as a bonus. Ben-Gurion said Israel's population will double and triple. Now, that was when we were 3 million. Today we're 6 million. It already has doubled. But I predict it will double and triple above and beyond that. And the political party that I'm forming, which is covered in my 4th book, Israel's Bible Block, talks about a Western civilization political party that will bring what America originally was all about to Israel. And that the Christians will have full representation in the Knesset, which they don't have today. And I will build an infrastructure in the new Israel, which will bring jobs to the millions of people that are coming to Israel, as well as those who are already there. Israel's population, Israel's economy is growing and growing and growing, in spite of all the pressures. The more America tries, not America, the more the world tries to bring in the BDS, boycott, disinvestment and sanctions, Israel's economy is growing in spite of it even more and more and more. And so I see a homecoming, tremendous homecoming of millions of Jews and Christians to the land of Israel. And Jerusalem is the apple of God's eye for the Jews and the Christians and for the Messiah.
And it says in Psalm 122, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And don't forget to do that. Pray for Avi on his travels. This man travels like nobody you've ever known in your entire life. He's constantly on the road. He's speaking. He's doing all kinds of events. And so pray for his health and that he'll be carried along by the strength of the Lord. And Avi, we do pray for you. Thank you very much for talking with us today. And may the Lord bless you and yours.
And God save America and bless you and yours.
Amen. I'm Gary Stearman. Keep watching, everybody. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.